Hey there, Teacher Nancy again. Hi. I wanted to talk about something a little bit different today. TPR, Total Physical Response. If you are working with VIP Kid, or if you want to be working with a VIP Kid, then you have probably already heard about this idea of TPR. As I've mentioned before, I teach college psychology, the way the mind works, specifically with learning, intelligence, and memory. Those are kind of my passions, my obsessions, if you will, inside the whole world of psychology. Look at this concept of TPR as developed by Dr. James Asher back in the 70s and how that relates to the way people learn. I have the unique privilege of having taught literally every age group from birth all the way to 60s and 70s. I have had experience teaching every single stage. And what I've noticed, a couple things. First of all, yes, there are significant differences in the way kids learn. There's a lot of different things going on, different brain regions, different development stages. But there's also a lot of similarities in the way that all of these different age groups learn. This is something that's very much interested me from a cognitive psychological standpoint. Very, very interesting and fun to me. When I first started watching all these YouTube videos about VIP Kid and what they're wanting you to do, how to get hired with VIP Kid, one of the things that I found the most fascinating really was the theory behind TPR. There are some misconceptions about this. It's not just, you need to look silly. Can you say, what do you see? Like, no, it's not just I'm going to look like an idiot and be all over the top, and then suddenly they're going to accidentally learn something. No, there's actually a lot more to TPR than looking like an idiot. Thankfully, anytime you learn something, physically, the brain is reshaping itself. This is technically called plasticity, the ability of the brain to make new synaptic connections and to continue learning new things all the way up until brain death. In the majority of people, language development and implementation takes place in the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere of the brain is more logical, more analytical, and tends to process information in a linear fashion. Guess what else we also do in a linear fashion? Make sentences. We start at the left and we make a full sentence all the way to the right. And then someone reads that sentence and we process that information sequentially, okay, in a linear manner. That's the left hemisphere. Well, what about the right hemisphere? I'm so glad you asked. The right hemisphere processes information as a whole, as a snapshot, not necessarily having a beginning and an end, big picture, seeing how these things connect, not necessarily this first and this first, but kind of all around. Wow. That's right hemisphere. So here's how TPR ties into this idea of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Traditionally, language is taught strictly to the left hemisphere. Enter Dr. Asher in the mid-70s, and he says, no, forget the left hemisphere. You want to primarily focus on teaching it to the right hemisphere. So we're going to have action and we're going to do these different things that stimulate the right hemisphere as opposed to the left. All right, well, here's the thing. Which way is right? Yes. Yes, the left hemisphere is starting to become specialized as the child is going through school-age years. So the left hemisphere is engaging in more linear learning. But you've still got the right hemisphere, which learns things as a whole. So when we incorporate TPR, when we get the kids moving their bodies as they are learning, what you're actually doing is you're making more connections in the brain. More connections that you make between ideas, okay, and between neurons, the better you'll remember something, okay? That's a common sense type thing, but it really is supported by the science. In neuroscience, the more synaptic connections you make, the better something is going to be retrieved. These synaptic connections, I teach it to my college students like this. I'm like, imagine a bullseye, okay? And let's say that you are going to memorize a word. That's it. You're just going to look at a word, you're going to memorize it. Bam, the end. Okay, you've basically made a bullseye like this. Okay, if you're trying to retrieve that information from your brain, guess where you've got to hit? Somewhere in this area. If you don't, nope, you're not going to remember it. When you make connections across the brain, when you delve into the meaning of words, if you connect them with ideas you already know, if you come up with a real life application, kind of picture a video in your head of this idea being played out in a real life scenario, guess what you've just done? You've taken that word and you've made all these synaptic connections just branching out all over your brain. But the more connections that you're making between these synapses, all right, the bigger you are getting that bullseye. Okay, so if you want to remember, if you want to retrieve some of this information, where do you need to hit? Oh, anywhere. Because there's connections all over the place. And once you hit, it automatically goes back to those connections and you get to retrieve the information. Why am I talking about this in a VIP kid video? For goodness sake, don't you realize we're not college students in your psychology class? Yes, of course I realize that. But here's how it ties in to TPR. When you encourage your students to physically respond, you are engaging more areas of the brain. The more areas of the brain you engage, the bigger that bullseye is getting. They're going to be learning more efficiently. They're also going to have a better time, a much easier time, retrieving that information later because they're connecting it on more than one level, not just a mental language. It's language and physical and audible, and they're tying in all of these at one time. This is going to make the retrieval much more efficient, much better, much easier, just better. Just better. This is also actually very applicable to adult learning. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned a little bit or a lot. I prefer a lot. If you are interested in learning more about VIP Kid, feel free to use my referral link below. Or if you'd like to subscribe to my channel and get more videos like this, whether about VIP Kid, about cognitive psychology, about learning, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you roughly once a week.